Once upon a time, nestled within a quaint village where rice fields carpeted the foothills, lived a bright young girl named Mai. A whirlwind of energy and questions, Mai's insatiable curiosity was often at odds with the village's unspoken rhythms. The laughter of her playmates and the gentle chatter at the market did little to satisfy her. Instead, she sought answers about the swirling stars and the whispering winds, questions that often left the village elders flustered. One afternoon, drawn by a melody only she seemed to hear, Mai strayed from the familiar paths. Following a winding trail uphill, she found herself in a grove of ancient willow trees. It was here that she saw him, an old monk meditating beneath a canopy of rustling leaves. A deep sense of peace hung in the air around him, an echo of the stillness Mai so desperately craved. Overcoming her initial hesitation, Mai approached. "You look so peaceful," she blurted out, breaking the silence. "How do you do that?" The monk opened his eyes, a twinkle in their depths. "Perhaps, young one, it is not a matter of doing, but of undoing," he replied mysteriously. Mai furrowed her brow. She yearned to understand, so she stayed. Sitting at the monk's feet, Mai discovered a whole new world within the simple act of being. The monk, sensing her open heart, introduced her to the teachings of the Buddha. He spoke of the mind as a wild garden, overrun with thorny weeds of negative emotions. Through the practices of mindfulness and meditation, he explained, one could learn to tend this garden, calming the wildness and letting peace blossom. Mai found herself returning to the willow grove again and again. Days bloomed into weeks, and as the seasons changed, so did she. The monk patiently guided her, using simple tales and everyday situations to illustrate complex concepts. Mai learned about impermanence, how happiness cannot be grasped and held, as fleeting as the sunlight filtering through the leaves. She learned of interconnectedness, recognizing that she, the monk, even the tiniest ants at her feet, were all bound together in a grand, cosmic dance. One morning, however, Mai arrived to find the monk gone. She felt a pang of sadness, an ache of loss. In her heart, she feared her teacher would never return. She had started to rely on his presence, his words. Her emotions churned. She felt out of balance. Just as she started to feel the familiar sting of frustration, she remembered the monk's lessons. Happiness cannot be grasped and held, he had often reminded her. Mai sat and breathed, focusing on the rise and fall of her chest. Slowly, she noticed her turbulent emotions swirling within her, her heart filled with both sadness and gratitude. In her mind's eye, she saw the monk, serene and smiling, and knew there was nothing he would want but for her to continue her practice. As if in response, she felt a wave of peace wash over her. Mai understood then that her emotions were a guide, a weather vane pointing her inwards. Her sadness at the monk's absence pointed to her growing attachment, but gratitude showed her he had planted the seeds of wisdom within her forever. Her emotions were not something to be feared or controlled, but instead observed and understood. And in that clarity, she realized her teacher was never truly gone. Back in the village, Mai was still an anomaly. While the other children squabbled, she watched, understanding with gentle compassion the source of their anger and hurt. This wasn't detachment, it was perspective. Mai felt her joy in their play, and knew when to step back, finding peaceful solitude in her own way. When whispers rose about her strange habits, she neither took offense nor felt embarrassed. Slowly, her quiet spirit started to affect those around her. Mai wasn't loud or pushy in her newly found wisdom. Instead, she listened patiently, even when disagreements arose. She didn't offer grand solutions. She asked small questions, sparking quiet, inner reflection in others. News of the wise girl eventually reached the ears of an old sage living on a nearby mountain peak. Curious, he invited Mai to visit. She made the journey readily, eager to learn and share. They spoke for hours, the sage surprised by May's thoughtful questions and deep insights. As the sun began to set, the sage stood. "There is little more I can teach you," he proclaimed. "Go, my child, be a lamp unto yourself. May your inner light shine outward, illuminating the path for others." May, the village girl everyone had underestimated, was finally seen. With the blessing of the old sage, May's wisdom became a guiding beacon for her community. She didn't become a monk, shave her head, or seek enlightenment in other faraway lands. Instead, she lived amidst the villagers, offering quiet reflections, sharing mindful moments, and embodying the Buddhist teachings of peace and compassion in her everyday life.